Today, I have a very special guest who recently moved to Canada with her family. Her name is Iviwe, and she moved from KZN in South Africa and now lives in Vancouver. And they used the power of LinkedIn to make their move to Canada. You're listening to Keep Your Life on Track with Busi Global. Iviwe, thank you so much for having a conversation with me today.
Thank you for the invite, Busi.
From a background perspective, can you just give us a bit of a background about yourself, where you grew up, where you studied, what you studied, and just give us the backstory of how you ended up coming to Canada, essentially?
Right. I was born in the Eastern Cape in a small town called Flagstaff, and I moved when I was, I think, 15, 16, and moved to Margate to live with my dad. I then went to university at Rhodes University, which is in Makanda in the Eastern Cape. Went back to the Eastern Cape again. That's where I met my husband, actually. We met in first year. In 2013, he then left and started working at Anglo American in Joburg, and I stayed to do my master's in chemistry at Rhodes University. So we did a long distance stint there for a bit of 3 years. And after I finished my master's, I joined him. I moved to Pretoria. I worked at the CSIR as an intern. And yeah, we got married in 2017 and we lived in Joburg since then. I lived in Kempton Park from 2017 until 2022.
Nice. And now you've recently moved to Vancouver in Canada with your family. What motivated that move for you?
I personally have always just wanted to live outside of South Africa. I didn't know how it was going to happen. I didn't know when it was going to happen, but I always wanted to do it. And I would tell my husband, I'm like, dude, we need to do this. And he was very apprehensive about it. He's like, no, like, let's do this. Let's travel. Let's see. But I always knew I wanted to live outside of South Africa. And I think it was in 2019, I found you on YouTube. And that's when I was like, okay, cool. This lady's talking about Canada. Let me see what she has to say. And also just like something different from South Africa. A lot of our friends moved to Australia, they moved to New Zealand and stuff. But I never really got the motivation to go that side because they always, the weather's similar. It's very similar people. So I never had that.
It's kind of like, what's the point of moving from South Africa to another South Africa?
Exactly. And I mean, I love the sun and all, but I'm like, it shouldn't be my motivation just because the sun's there. Like the weather, come on, if other human beings can survive, obviously I should be fine. There should be, because the first thing people say when you say Canada, they're like, oh, it's freezing. So I'm like, there's humans there. How are they surviving? How are they able to live from day to day?
And I think the biggest myth with Canada is that there's people who seem to think it's snowing everywhere all the time. And, no, that's not the case. We have moments, and there's places like where you are, where the weather is a lot milder than a lot of parts of Canada. But even for me in Ontario, it's not like there's snow January to December.
Every day
It's a few months in the year that have snow. But your story with, always wanting to live abroad, I find that I resonate with it quite a lot. My husband and I were the same. And with us, like ending up moving to Canada, it was him who brought the conversation up. I was at first just like, we're settled. Why do you want to go start from scratch, building a life? We're going to be far from family. But over time, I was like, okay, this actually makes sense. And just to broaden our experiences and expose our kids to a different way of life and more opportunities than they would have access to living in South Africa, I think it makes sense.
sure.
It makes sense. Yeah. It's so interesting that you
Exactly.
found us like in the year that.
Yeah, literally. Like I found you on YouTube and I was literally watching all of your videos and I'm just like, okay, Canada it is.
Yeah. I remember for us, when it came to picking where exactly we're moving, I had similar sentiments to what you shared about certain places where I'm like, it seems like a lot of South Africans that you'll speak to who are moving, they are all going to the
They're
same
going
places. And the
there. Yeah.
motivation
I think
is,
now it's Dubai.
right? That's true.
Now
That's
it's
true.
Dubai. Like a lot of South
I
Africans are
would
moving to
love to
Dubai.
visit Dubai, and hopefully it's going to happen soon. But I would love to experience and see what is the hype like with the place.
Yeah. What's
Yeah.
the hype is a good thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So that was the thing. I'm just like, I want to experience something different. And our kids are super young. We're not worried about any kind of long-term relationships at school or
Yeah.
education-wise. They go to school and they draw a few cigarettes.
How old are your
Whether you're
kids?
doing it in South Africa. My daughter is 5, and then my son is 3. So, I mean,
Nice. Oh,
whether they
they're
go
still
to
so
South African
tiny.
school and they're drawing little figurines, it's gonna be the same, regardless of whether you're doing those figurines. So that was my logic
Yeah,
behind
true,
that. I'm like,
true,
it really doesn't matter, especially in the formative years. I think education in the world is kind of similar. They use a lot of
true.
similar resources as well. Everything is online, and they just like kind of apply it to the situation of the children, based on their needs and whatever. But basically, it's the same. So yeah, that was our motivation. Just try something different, something new. We didn't know how we were gonna make it happen. And I when I was watching your videos and other people on YouTube, it seems like it was like this impossible task, and there's so many documentations. And I was like, you know what? I'm gonna take it a step at a time, and I'm gonna figure this out because I
It is,
actually want to do this.
yeah. And it's definitely figure outable. Like, I know if you're going to start looking, oh, there's this program and there's that program, what's the difference between this one and that one? Which one makes
It's
the
a
most
lot.
sense? It can feel very overwhelming. It can feel, and I think that's where
Mm,
a lot of people will also just use an immigration consultant, for example. Nothing against
yeah.
consultants, but I do think it's a process that people at large can take themselves through. If you just give yourself time to go through different things, it's definitely doable by yourself. So now you shared a post
Yeah.
on Instagram about how you revamped you and your husband's LinkedIn profiles, and your husband had a recruiter reach out to him within around a month. So can you share your experience in using LinkedIn for your husband's job search and how it contributed to his success in finding a job in
Yeah.
Canada?
Yeah, crazy stuff. So in May, I obviously, after watching all of your tips and things on how to use LinkedIn, and just following like tips from other creators on how to make your LinkedIn stand out, what information you should include. I was like, in May, I did that for both him and I. And then in June, we went on holiday. We went to Egypt actually, and yeah, obviously network wasn't that great, so we didn't check any of our emails or socials, anything like that.
And
But
this
when we
was
came
last
back,
year, right? 2022.
yeah,
Okay.
no, this was, when was this? I'm confused now. It was this
Oh, wait,
year.
Misha,
It was
this
this year.
year. Damn.
Yeah,
Okay.
it was this
Okay.
year in May. In May.
Nice.
So we went on holiday to Egypt and came back, and we checked all of our stuff, and I was like, oh, dude, we have this inbox. 3 days later, we saw it. This lady had sent you a message, head recruiter person, the talent acquisition person or whatever. So then we go through the LinkedIn, and then we looked at my profile, and then we went on kind of like those word searches things where you can verify someone's LinkedIn, to see if
Mm-hmm.
this person really works
Is an
on this. Because
actual,
obviously you don't
yeah,
want to answer every scam
scammers.
out there. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we went on to the actual company profile to see that she is actually hired. There are people that work with her that are also in the same group. So verified it, and then replied to her and said, okay, it was just like, hey, I'm going to have a conversation with you about a potential position in Canada for my husband. So he did geology, and then he
Mm-hmm.
did rock engineering. So it's a rock engineering consulting position in kind of like a mining consulting firm. So they said, okay, cool. Everything literally happened so crazy fast. It's like when we tell people like in the space of 3 months we had to do everything.
I
It's
love
like,
it.
what, in 3 months? Like literally in 3 months. So we had his first interview, had his second interview, and then literally a week later the lady comes back and said, hey, we're ready to make an offer.
Nice.
This is the offer that we're making for you guys. It's relocation included for the family and everything. So we were like, I mean, cool. Why not? At
Yeah.
this point, for me, I mean, so going through the express entry, because that's also part of the process that we were looking at,
Mm-hmm.
initially. And with everything happening right now in the world, like Canada kind of switched up their immigration policies, and it's very difficult. I mean, my points were decent. Like I had a 481 because I was like just turned 31, so I lost like
Yeah.
5 points sadly. But I have a PhD, so I'm getting maximum points. And yeah, it was crazy. We were below 500, and now the express entry is
It's
500 and
been
above.
above.
So that was like a no go for us. So that came out of nowhere, and we're like, okay, this is our opportunity. I mean, we were looking at this since 2019. This is our chance, and just the ease of how everything happened. it was just a confirmation that we're doing what we meant to,
Yeah.
Nothing was incredible. I think the most difficult part was the police clearance, which was 5 weeks.
Wow. Why did it take that long? Do you know?
I had no idea because we did everything right. We went directly to Pretoria and went to the police station there that actually deals with police clearances. And we were like, okay, surely we
It's
were
gonna be
there at the
quick.
source.
Yeah. We did the
And
same
yeah,
thing
that
as
was
well, just to try and get it, done
yeah,
quickly.
to get everything done faster. But that was literally the only thing that took a little bit of time. But we didn't really worry because in that time we were busy doing other things. Like we were busy just doing other things, and that time really didn't feel like that long. But yeah, that was the hardest part of it, just waiting that 5 weeks for the police clearance.
I
And
absolutely
yeah,
love how short your journey was, because I feel like a lot of people get demotivated when they hear timelines like, oh, it took us maybe a year or 2 years or 3 years.
2 years.
There are journeys that can take that long, but the 3 months time frame, I'm just like, yes. And
It's crazy.
it is. And it's one of those things when I say or talk about the power of LinkedIn and how a lot of people are sleeping on it. And I still think there's, as much as more and more people are using it now, I do still think there are people who are sleeping on LinkedIn. They're just like, oh, I'm on there, I'm not on there, LinkedIn, And one of the biggest things when it comes to when you look at the point system and how things have changed from the time that we left, I don't remember the exact score that we had, but I think it was maybe 474 that got us through, and it was above what the cutoff at that time was. So somebody who is listening right now and you're thinking, maybe I can update my LinkedIn and try get a job and that's how I end up moving, but you sleep on that, that window of opportunity is going to close. You're going to be looking
Exactly.
back in a year, you're going to hear a number of people's stories sharing how they moved in this way. And then you think, I should have acted at that time. So that's just one thing I want to put out there to anyone who is watching or
Yeah.
listening, that if you are somebody who knows that I want to move and my points at this point just are not making sense, because I think a lot of things got messed up with the pandemic when they just stopped
Yeah, they never
everything.
recovered there.
Yeah, so there's a lot of people who kept putting in their applications. And another thing that I will also say I've seen, a lot of people go above and beyond. So, for example, you have your PhD and then you say, oh, I'm going to go and do French so I can increase my points with the language thing. So it ends up becoming a lot more competitive. But if you can focus on something that you can control, which is something like LinkedIn, I think that can make a difference. And this brings me to an exciting collaboration that Ivio and I are going to be doing. And it is pertaining to helping one of you who are listening or watching up level and revamp your LinkedIn so you can give yourself a chance at getting an opportunity and job abroad in a place like Canada, or you could be looking to move anywhere else in the world. Because as much as we spoke about Dubai at the beginning, having that international work experience also counts and can help. So if you are somebody who's looking to come to Canada and you're thinking, oh, maybe I want to come to Canada, but there might be other opportunities outside of Canada, consider those opportunities, go and work in those countries, and then use that experience to come and work in Canada. So I would say I will add our handles, our Instagram handles. Make sure you are following us on Instagram, both me and Iviwe, and we will be announcing how the entire process to win yourself a LinkedIn revamp that is done by both me and Iviwe. It's going to be shared on a post on this. So just make sure you are getting to follow us on Instagram. Okay, so from a transition perspective, working in South Africa and working now in Canada, how has your husband found things, like when he shares how the work life is in Canada compared to how it was in South Africa?
Yeah, for him also it's what you call like a complete industry change because he's primarily for the past 10 years worked in the mining environment, literally on the mine every single day. And this is a consulting firm. So he has to go into town in an office. So that on its own is quite a big adjustment for him. But in terms of work, he's still working in mine projects. So he's still working on actual mining projects. And one of the things that he had done while he was still in South Africa was learn a specific software that is used in North American mining.
Okay.
And that was one of the reasons why they even recruited him. because he had the knowledge of that software specifically. So because he had that knowledge of the software, it's the same software that he used in South Africa in the mine, is the same software that he's using now for his modeling and things like that. So that really is kind of like a bridging gap. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the things I'm always telling him, there's a reason why they've hired you, because you've got this mining experience. A lot of the people that work in consulting is people that come straight from university. They really don't have hands-on experience in the mines. Mm-hmm. So he's got that actual live experience being in the mining industry. He's able to talk from a client perspective as well as of a consultant perspective. So that is one of the benefits that he's seeing, that he's worked in the mine and he's able to give that value in the consulting business. So he's adapting, he's adapting to the cold. He has to wake up, and I mean, it's right now, it's pretty dark, even in the morning at like 7, he has to leave in the dark. But he comes back early. There were certain things that we wanted to change in terms of our lifestyle, because when you used to work in the mines, you'd have to leave at 4 a.m. at home. Oh, wow. And then drive back at like 4 p.m. So the kids barely ever saw him, only on the weekends, you know? Yeah. So for us, the adjustment was, okay, we want to gain back our time in the morning with you. We want to gain back the time in the afternoon. Sometimes he comes back from work, and he's able to take the kids for a walk to the park, which would have never happened in South Africa, you know? That would have never, unless he had the day off. And one of the positives of being in a consulting firm is that they are hybrid work. So he can work remote as well. There are days where he can take the day off and work at home. And then there are days where he can go into the office and things like that. So the reasons why we wanted to make this had a lot to do with our family structure and wanting to spend even more time with each other, and that's also lessening the travel time. He would drive, I think, an hour and a half each way in the morning in South Africa. Now he's taking a 20-minute train, and in the morning when he tells me, okay, I'm at home, I'm like, oh, already? Like literally, I've just put away the dishes and he's already at work, you know? Nice. And that for us is something that we really wanted as a family. Nothing is ever going to be perfect, but there's pros and cons in everything. And I think one of the reasons why we wanted to do this change was because we wanted those pros in our lives. Yeah.
Nice. That is something that I can see in our journey as well, because my husband used to work in power gen, and he had those drives, like long drives, where he's driving from
in the middle of nowhere,
and there's just that up and down. It's like 2 hours going this way, 2 hours coming back. He's tired when he's coming back. Yeah, and it's the things that you don't really I mean, you can think about them, but it's just, okay, it is what it is. You know, this is the kind of job that this person has. But now it's like he works from home. It's a very nice balance from a life perspective. It's a very nice balance. From a cultural work perspective, is there any big differences that he's mentioned, he's seen in the workplace?
I think Canada, one of the things that they do a lot, and he said is that was missing in the mining space, is just like inclusivity. It's funny because you would expect that in a country like South Africa with our, you know, in the workplace, just like they get a lot of like racial bias training, being sensitive to other cultures. I think also because in the workplace in Canada, there's people from everywhere, like literally everywhere in the workplace. So just being able to know, to respect other cultures, to work well with people from different backgrounds, not question people and try to understand. A lot of some people might be Chinese and they still have a very heavy accent. You need to be like, you know, understanding of that and say, you know what, maybe talk a little bit slower for me or whatever, you know, just in the workplace, there's a little bit more just like understanding of each other. Instead of in South Africa, I think he had a completely different experience where, people were just like, you know, you're just going to have to do what you have to do. And there's people that just think like they bossy and you listen to this and it doesn't matter. You know, there's no respect on cultural background and where the people come from and just like working together with respect.
It's crazy when you think about it in that way, considering how diverse of a nation South Africa is.
That's what I'm saying. It's weird.
Yeah, it's crazy. And I've never honestly thought about how much a difference there is in terms of even the training that they provide in the workplaces. Yeah, because I think because of the immigration and knowing that there's people coming from different parts of the world, they probably it's something that's more in their face, that we need to prioritize learning and helping people just be more inclusive, being more open and inquisitive. Because I had a conversation with another lady who recently, maybe it's not recently anymore, I think she's been in Canada now for maybe it's around 9 months. But she lived in South Africa, so she moved to South Africa to study. She is originally from Zambia. And one of the things she shared was a difference when I had a conversation with her on the podcast was that people in South Africa, when they are asking, like, oh, what are you doing here? It's not so much when South Africans specifically asked that question. It wasn't so much from a curiosity perspective, but it was more of a, why did you leave your country? Why aren't you going back home?
Yeah.
Versus in Canada, when people are asking that question, it's genuinely from a curiosity perspective. Tell me about yourself. Oh, how is living in this place? What's different in Canada, for example? Because I've also seen a lot of people who are in Canada who will watch my videos and they just like seeing Canada from the perspective of somebody who wasn't born here, which is very interesting to hear. But yeah, the workplaces in South Africa, they need to do better.
Yeah, I don't know what we're doing.
Yeah,
I
we,
don't
we
know.
need to do
We're just not,
better.
yeah, it's toxic, it's wild, it's like
Mm.
hierarchical, it's just a mess. There's a way of like having coworkers and just having respect with each other's culture. Because, as
There's so many
individuals, we come into the
differences.
workplace,
Yeah.
we come from different backgrounds. And it's important that when you are working with people from different backgrounds, and not only is it like, oh, a secret of things like, oh, maybe I should be nice. No, like the company culture
Yeah.
has to introduce that to the people and say, hey, this is how everyone works in this place, regardless of where you come from or what you do. This is how we work and relate to each other in the workplace. So yeah, that was one of the things that he highlighted that was very different for him, and it's like refreshing.
It is. Yeah, it sounds refreshing for me, having experienced it, but haven't never really put it into words in that way or thought about it specifically in that way. Canada makes an effort. It's not perfect, but it makes an effort for sure on that
Yeah.
part. So now you share about your travel with your family, with your husband and your two kids, and you've visited and gone to a lot of different and exciting places, Egypt, Zimbabwe, Seychelles, Zanzibar, like you're all over the place. How do you feel or see that experience of traveling with your kids? How has that helped you and your family generally adjust maybe to the lifestyle in Canada? And
Yeah.
what are some of the things that you found enjoyable living in Canada? And when you compare to all the different places that you visited with your family, like what has been one of those enjoyable or challenging things in Canada? And has that travel helped you maybe feel a bit more settled somehow in Canada?
Yeah, I think every mom or every parent's nightmare is like being in like an airplane and your child is like going wild and screaming at the top of their
True.
lungs. But majority of people have an understanding that there's children in the world. I don't care where you go, unless you're going to the North Pole or wherever, where there's like literally no children there, or the South Pole. I don't know where you're gonna go where there's no children. Everywhere in the world, every piece of society has a child there. Then, so one of the things that we've just prioritized is to get our children used to being in a car for long periods of time, being in a plane. I think both of them flew before they were like a few weeks old,
Yeah.
just for them to get used to just being in those kind of environments. Because any child will be scared of the unknown. Children are very,
Even
they're
as
used to routine. Yeah,
even with
adults,
adults,
even
like there's
adults,
people who are scared of
exactly.
moving because they're like, oh, there's so many
They,
unknown
they don't
things.
know. Yeah, there's so
Yeah.
many unknowns. And so the only way to familiarize your children with travel is to take them to travel. They're not going to know if they like it or they can tolerate it unless you've done it.
True.
So for us, it's something that we really like. When we got married, we went to Mauritius on our honeymoon. We went on a Euro trip right after, and we knew that having kids will not stop that. And I mean, my son, when we went to the reunion, and we had like for the first time at 11 p.m. I'm not 11 p.m. flight. He cried. He cried on the plane.
Oh.
It's not like now that they know how to cry, it's always been easy. He
Yeah.
cried like for an hour, and we tried as much as we could to get him to fall asleep. But obviously, being that he wasn't at home, he was used to his routine and things like that. It happens, it happens. And when I say majority of the people on the airplane will understand, majority of the people understand that obviously there'll be one or two people granting it, like, oh, there shouldn't be children here,
Yeah.
which happens anywhere in the world, but you just mind your own business and let that person grant and moan in the back.
Yeah.
So for us,
Love that.
we
Yeah.
just knew that we had to familiarize, especially because I've always known I wanted to live abroad. So I knew that,
You need to
eventually
be
the children
ready.
will have to be in a plane somewhere,
They
somehow.
need to be ready. I
They
think
need to know.
that is a very important aspect to bring up, especially when you have kids and you know that you want to move. Just doing things that are helping them mentally prepare. As much as they won't
Yeah.
know that's what we are actually doing. I remember with my firstborn, there were people who would be so surprised when, because for me, like when I had away to my firstborn, I was still in university. Okay. So I'm still in university. I'm traveling between, there's times where I would go from Pretoria. I am going to Johannesburg to fetch him from my parents' place. We were living in Mpumalanga at the time because of Tammy's work. That's where we had our house. And he had to be used to sitting in a car seat and not expect somebody to be with him all the time at the back. And there were people whose kids could not do that and they could not understand. How is your child this young, but they can
Sitting
sit
there.
in a car seat and they don't cry? I'm just like, well, they just, they had to get used to it from a very young age. And it's something that as parents, if you get used to, because I think this is a bad habit that a lot of South Africans have, just carrying a child in the back seat of a car. It's not safe, number one.
Yeah,
But you're
it's
also teaching
terrible.
your child that when we get into this car, you are going to be in my hands.
On
And
my
that's what the
hands.
child
Yeah.
learns, and they don't get used to other things. So if you know that this is the situation that I want to be in, which is moving abroad, I think it's such a nice point to bring up that people should start doing things that help their children just get exposed to things that are similar to what they'll experience when you actually do go and live abroad.
Definitely. And one of the things that my husband also loves to do is to watch documentaries. We will watch airplane documentaries, train documentaries,
Just getting
the
them excited
Egyptian one,
about all
yeah,
these things.
like show them the pyramids, and then when we there say, hey,
Do you
remember we watched
remember?
this on the documentary and they were talking about the mummies and everything. Look, this is where it was shot. This is exactly what it was saying in the documentary. This is it now. Like it's in real life, you can see it. There's lots of things you can do to prepare the children, and just like the
Yeah.
toys, even the toys that you give them, toy trains, toy buses, toy planes, and things. Those things are like really good for them because then they start playing with those things and saying, "Oh, I'm going on a plane." They do a lot of those like role playing things. You can do a lot of those things.
Yeah, I love that you share that aspect of traveling with kids on your Instagram. And that's one of the things I will say people should go and follow you just so they can see that life doesn't stop just because you've had kids. It doesn't mean, because you'll hear people say things like, oh, I'm trying to travel before I have kids. I want to go to all these places, as if life is supposed to just pause until
Yeah.
your kids turn 18 or something. But you're showing that it's
Yeah.
very much possible to have these memories, take them to
Mm,
places, have them have these experiences. And yeah, I do think it also helps build their characters in a certain
for
way,
sure.
you know?
For sure. And patience, obviously when they started flying, like I was saying, my son cried and things. But in the next flight, they were able to occupy themselves. In the next one, they're able to say,
Yeah.
okay, in the
It's like
next
I've
one, oh,
done this
let's look
before.
outside. I want to sit by the window. I want to look at this. Oh, look at the clouds. And the next one, and then you're able to, over
Nice.
time, just keep adding hours and hours. Because I was talking to this other lady as well, who was sending me a DM, and she's, oh, I don't know if I could make it like 10 hours on a plane with the kid. I'm like, you don't have to. Like, there's so many closer places. You can go an hour away. You can go to Cape
Yeah.
Town. You can go to
If you're in
Mauritius. You
Joburg,
don't have
try
to.
Durban or something.
Yeah, do a shorter flight and get your kid used to that sensation of being in the plane. And, my kids are crazy. They even watch like air crash investigation and things,
Nice.
They'll even watch things like that because they're so into planes. They like to know how it works, the whole thing. So once you get them interested in those things, then they're like, oh, this is actually like quite fun. And sometimes you'll have a bad experience, I think. And people will say, oh, I've had a bad experience and so I can't do it. But not every experience is always going to be like that. You could have a
True.
bad flying experience and then like your holiday is great. You can have a terrible holiday and then you fly. You have
It's
to, it's
good.
like going, it's
Yeah.
the day to day with the kids. You always have the ups and downs with the kids and things like that.
And life in general. Like it's probably even teaching them
Mm.
life lessons. Life is not linear. It's not always
Yeah.
up. It's not always down. There's different things
Yeah.
happening at
There's
different
different
times.
things.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
now, so considering your family's love for traveling, have you had any chance to explore any parts of Vancouver or Canada in general since you?
Yeah, I think we came the perfect time. My love for travel is only rivaled by my love for Christmas. So
Nice.
this is perfect timing for me because every park has a kind of a Christmas decorations going on. So right now we're just going through the the Christmas installations, just looking at all the. It's like literally every Christmas time. I'm always watching Christmas movies, and the houses are decorated, the parks, the things are decorated. And I used to go with my kids to in South Africa as well. We used to hunt for these things, and now every single next park here is it's
There's something happening. They
it's
make such.
decorated something.
That's one thing I would say I absolutely love about Canada. I feel like they make a big deal of almost every holiday. Like if there's a
Every
holiday,
holiday.
it's we're making a big deal out of it. Oh, it's summer, we're gonna
Yeah.
make a big deal out of that as well, which is nice. It's a very nice and refreshing thing. But yeah, I also love like the lights and the way people will
The
decorate their
lights.
homes
Oh,
as well. I'm just
beautiful.
like, oh, let's just drive around and look
I'm
at people's
obsessed.
houses.
so, so right now we still like to trying to look around and see the parks and see all the Christmas decorations. I think in January or February we're gonna try to go to Calgary, get some
Okay,
skiing lessons. That's one of my dreams. I want to learn how to ski. I want my kids
nice.
to learn how to ski. So I want to immediately as soon as I get them into ski classes
Yeah,
and start doing that. So that's probably going to be our first vacation out of Vancouver. But for now, we're just looking at the
exploring
Christmas
Vancouver.
and
Yeah,
exploring. Yeah, going to the parks. My husband has taken a day, like at home work day, like once a week for us to just, just do something as a family if we need to, because we have to move out of our Airbnb as well. So we moved into our rental, going in there, checking it out, putting some things that we need to do. Yeah, we're keeping it Vancouver local for now, just seeing everything around here. I've also got some university friends that live here, so we've had a couple
nice.
of catch-ups with them. We haven't seen them in like forever. But yeah, I think the first vacation is definitely going to be Calgary since we're going into winter now. And yeah, we're going to try to see Alberta and just try to. I think Banff or something is the national park that's there because they have
Yeah,
a
I've
lot of
heard it's very,
skiing
very
resorts.
beautiful.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I've had my eye on that. Initially, when we came here, they said that they're going to put us in Calgary.
Okay.
But I think that the office is actually downtown Vancouver, and then they're like, okay, if you guys don't mind, you can just live in Vancouver. And we're like, okay, cool. They're like, okay, the temperature is much milder. You might find it's a better adjustment for you coming from
Yeah.
SA. And so if you feel like you want to move to Calgary at a later stage, then you can do it. So
Yeah.
yeah.
That's nice. So have you had any highlights or surprises or things that you just did not expect since you moved to Canada?
Yeah, for sure. I was saying this just the other day because I was in Europe for about 2 months at the beginning of 2022. So I was in Romania for the first month, and the second month I was in the Netherlands. I was in a small town, Breda, in the Netherlands. I stayed there. So I was fully expecting Vancouver to be like very like predominantly white. I don't know why, because obviously it's in Canada, it's in North America, that's what you expect. I really just expected it to be very similar to my Eastern European and European experience, where it's predominantly white, a few sprinkles of color here and there. But Vancouver is very diverse. I was actually like shocked. I was very shocked by that. That was one thing that I actually didn't expect. I think the week that we got here was also very rainy. So Vancouver lived up to the name, and we're like, oh, this place rains crazy. Like our phones were pinging every time. There's going to be rainfall this in your area
Yeah.
in the next 2 minutes. I'm like, really, every other hour there's this happening, but it's simmered down now. I think it's going into more winter, so it's more dry. The sun's still coming out, but it's definitely less rain. Um, yeah, but generally, I think also because I'm always with my kids, people are always just super friendly. I was talking to my husband that day, and he was like, he greets people, but they don't greet him back. I'm like, I think you need kids.
Take your kids with
you
you.
need to you need to take a kid because literally, like everywhere I go, people are like, oh hi, they talk to the kids, nice kids, and they talk to
Yeah.
me. I'm like, I'm pretty sure it's because I have kids because I've seen people who are just walking on their own. They're very
And
much
they're
like
not
on their
even,
phone.
yeah.
They're not paying attention.
That's something we also noticed right after moving to Canada. We were just like, having kids around you, like it puts you into things. Like, ikufaka intweni.
Yeah,
Because
yeah,
people
it's
are
like
just,
it's a buffer.
yeah, people will be more nicer. Like, even if you are, because I remember even when we were looking for a place to stay, the lady the realtor who was helping us get our first rental, there was a point where she also came with some toys. Oh my gosh, like they just moved. She was also somebody who had immigrated, but a long time ago. So she's like, I just understand, you've moved. They've probably given up a lot of their stuff, and they still have
Everything,
those
yeah.
two car toys. But people are
Oh,
just
cute.
extra nice when you have kids. It's one of
Yeah,
those things.
I was,
It's a nice thing to have. So if you have kids,
yeah,
don't leave them behind. Come with
yeah.
them.
And I must take him to work every morning. I must
Sure.
take him to work every morning. But yeah, that's it, like I was saying, like when we were talking earlier, in terms of lifestyle, I think for us, we've always been just like keeping it like super casual. Just we're not extravagant people. We don't buy name brands because we know our ultimate goal is for us to experience travel and things like that. So we buy what is necessary, and so for us, living in our means is exactly what we plan to do, whether we're in Johannesburg or whether we're in Vancouver, wherever we are. We're
Yeah.
gonna leave, we're gonna be within our means, whatever that means. We're never gonna just be like trying to do things that we're not within.
Keeping up with the
Yeah,
Joneses.
nah, then that's not the vibe.
Yeah.
Even when we were back in South Africa, when we had the option to say, oh, you know how realtors are like, oh, you guys can buy this house, you can afford this bond, be like, no, thank you. Like, we
We
want to
have
buy a
other
flat.
things.
That's what we
Yeah.
want. We want to stay around this much, and we don't want to spend any more than that. I think a lot of the times people get pressured into, oh, this person is doing this, how much this person is
True.
doing this. As a family, you set your priorities, right? You say, this is what we want to do, this is what we want to achieve. And anything that doesn't have to do with that goal, you can just kick it on the side and say, no, this is not for us, this is not for us, because you know what your ultimate goal is.
Yeah. And
So
looking ahead, what are your family's goals and aspirations with your move to Canada?
yeah, well, we're gonna definitely go back to our express entry profile and try to get that permanent residency. I know my husband now he's talking about like potentially going to Germany. I'm like, mate, let's wait. Now that he's seen another country, okay, maybe let's move somewhere else. I'm like, let's get this one sorted. So yeah, we're gonna go ahead and continue with our express entry, hopefully become permanent residents of Canada, and just keep exploring the world, because one of the main reasons that we wanted to come also is the fact that the proximity to the US, because my husband being a geologist, he loves volcanoes in Hawaii, so that's one of the things that we would want to do, going to Alaska, going into the national parks in the US, because there's so many crazy, the Grand Canyon, Yellowstone, all those places that he grew up looking at geography in high school. That's the places that we want to do and go
Yeah.
see. And being closer means the kids don't have to be on a 12, 14-hour flight from SA to the US and then having us spend 7 days there, then flying another 24 hours. Now we're much closer. We can actually
You could even do a
just,
drive if you wanted to.
yeah, exactly. So that was one of the things that we were also thinking, this gives us proximity to the destinations that we love, like Tokyo, that he's an anime fan as well. He's always wanted to go to Japan. So yeah, those are the things that we ultimate goal is to be closer to those destinations that are so much better than when we were in South Africa. And
Nice, nice. So for anyone who is wondering, like both you and your husband are on an open work permit right now, correct?
well, he's in a closed one.
Oh, he's
I
in a
don't know.
close. Okay, can you
Yeah.
go into just a bit of an explanation for anyone who's wondering what is the difference between having a closed work permit and an open work permit?
All right. So he's in a closed work permit. Usually, when an employer will pay for your relocation costs, then such, they will obviously want you to be in a closed work permit, meaning that you can only work for them
Makes
in that
sense.
specific country. I mean, it makes sense. They've invested in you, they've paid for you to live your home country, to come to this country. So I wouldn't expect them to say, oh, well, you can work for anybody once you
And
get
then
here.
go, yeah.
It's not, yeah, so he's in a closed work permit. But as for me, they had asked me and they had asked, do I want to just have a normal tourist visa where I could just stay at home and stay with the kids, or do I want the opportunity to have an open work permit? And so obviously I said, yes, obviously I would want an open work permit. If anything came up work-wise, I would gladly accept it. But obviously we want to give ourselves a bit of a buffer with the kids, make sure that they're adjusting very well. So I will not be actively looking for a job, I think, until maybe next year, Feb, March time,
Okay.
where they've gone to school and they've settled and, everything is, is properly adjusted back to routine for us, waking up in the
Yeah.
morning, going to school, coming back, knowing that I'm there and picking them up. And then, based on that, then we can start doing. So with an open work permit, it means that I can basically find work anywhere in Canada. Um, any employer that is willing to employ me they can see my work permit, and it says open work permit for the next 3 years. I can use it anyhow. I can work for someone today, I can work for another person tomorrow. I have no bounds, luckily for me. So yeah, that's the difference between a closed and open work permit.
Nice, nice. Thank you for that explanation. And from a building connections perspective and your community, since you've moved to a new place, have you and your husband been able to expand your connections? For him, both professionally and socially, but for you, since you're not in the work environment right now, have you been able to meet other people socially? And what are the ways that you would encourage other people maybe to do the same if they are moving, if you've been able to do that? Because I know it's still pretty early
Yeah,
days.
it's
It's
still
still
early
pretty
days.
early
Still
days.
early.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we're coming up on a month now, I think. Just the end of this. That's why the Airbnb lease is coming
Yeah.
up, because we've
Yeah.
only booked for a month. So we're coming up to a month. But we actually have a play date on the weekend now coming up.
Nice.
We met a couple who at church. Met a couple. The good thing about Vancouver is that you're always gonna find an immigrant somewhere.
True.
Somebody, even if they were here 400 years ago, 200 years ago, 20
They
days ago,
understand
somebody,
what you're going through.
somebody has immigrated here somewhere somehow. So that's the good thing about Vancouver. So we have made people, our first people that we, strangers, that is from our church. But like I mentioned, there is a few of people that I went to university with that are living right now in Vancouver. We've met up with them. But yeah, our first point was church. We were able to meet. But I think if you do what you love, so basically, if you like running, I like to run, you go into marathons and things like that, you'll meet people that like the things that you like to do. There's also a lot of like communities on Facebook. I've seen a lot of communities. Next week, I think on the 9th, the South Africans living in Vancouver group on Facebook is also meeting up to look at the Christmas lights. They're doing like a walk, and everyone is like taking photos and things.
Nice, nice.
So there's always something to do, and there's always someone to meet up with. There's people that do pub crawls if you're into that kind of thing. There's people that do. There's a lot of rec centers as well, where you can just take your kids for the day. I'm sure you'll bump into someone, make a bit of conversation if you want to. There's yoga studios if you're into that kind of thing, pottery, whatever. I think the good thing is that there's options, and you can do what you like and hope to meet people through that. That's what you like. If you like dogs, you can walk dogs, put a poster there and say, I want to walk dogs on the weekend, and meet people that way. Whatever activities you like to partake in, you can find people that way.
True.
Yeah.
Now, from a church perspective, for anybody who is watching, was it something that was very easy for you to find a church that you felt you resonated with? Or did somebody maybe recommend that you go to this particular church? How did you find a church that you ended up going to?
This one, I saw it on my run in the morning.
Nice, nice.
It's like literally 10 minutes away from the Airbnb. So I found it on my run, and I was like, oh, this is the church. Let's just go.
Yeah.
We're not very fussy when it comes to, we tend to like an older crowd, like older people. I feel like it's a nicer vibe. But I think you can go. And the thing is also in Vancouver, a lot of the churches are based on language. I think there's like Italian, Spanish, and French, and Mandarin, and Gujarati, Punjabi, based on the group of people and the language that they will speak on that sermon. So you can also use that as a way of searching for the church, either English speaking church or French speaking church, whatever you want. And there's also, if you someone who goes to a particular church in South Africa, like every nation, for example, there's every nation churches all over the world, and then you can just find the one nearest to you. I used to do park run a lot in South Africa. So if you have the park run badge, you can also use that same badge in South Africa, in Vancouver. I guess that's one of the benefits of being from a Commonwealth. We kind of have very similar things that the English are doing in England, and then they just kind of do it perpetually all throughout the Commonwealth. I was really trying to do my registration for park run, and they were like, no, this number exists, and you can just log in and then just update your location, which is pretty cool.
I think
So yeah, I'm the
that's one of the, I don't know if calling it a gift makes sense.
whatever.
Just
That's what
looking
I'm
at the
saying. Like,
history.
it's
Yeah.
something.
But it's like it makes it so much easier being somebody who's from South Africa to adjust with a lot of things. Because you're like,
Mm,
there's a lot of things that are similar, even from a food perspective. There's a lot of things that are
yeah,
similar. You're not going, to a place where it's like, oh, there's so many things that I'm going to be learning afresh or
yeah,
trying that are new. So, yeah,
for
that's why I'm like,
sure.
I don't know if I'll call it a gift because the
I don't know
history
what
is
it
not really,
is.
yeah, the
Exactly.
history
I
is
was
not
talking to the
pretty.
lady that was helping us, and she's from the UK. And I was saying to her, it's so strange because she was driving me into this area called Brentwood. And in South
Mm,
Africa, we lived in Maple Ridge, in Maplewood.
mm.
And that's literally another street or another place here. And Brentwood was our mall. Our mall was called Brentwood Mall
You
in South
know,
Africa. And there's Brentwood.
living in Canada, I think it's one of those things. We were in Ottawa the other sometime in the summer, and there was a bridge that was called Pretoria Bridge. I was like,
Yeah.
how many
How
things
was
do
this?
we have that are still, linked to that dark
Yeah.
history that the country has?
Yeah, it's
And that,
crazy.
yeah, it's really interesting. It's really
Yeah.
interesting. And I don't know, I don't want to go into the political
Yeah.
stuff.
Different story, but yeah. Depends,
Yeah.
but yeah, there's so many churches, I think, yeah. And yeah, once we move also we'll probably, I mean, I'll go for a run and see another one and see where we
True.
finally feel comfortable. I think we'll eventually find a place where we feel comfortable, and the kids love Sunday school wherever they go. They just like to go
Nice.
down and play with the other kids. Especially my daughter, she makes friends like in 0.5 seconds.
Nice, nice.
Like in one time, you're not looking and she's
I do
already
think
talking to
that
someone.
traveling also has something to do with making that a bit easier.
Yeah,
So
for sure.
I've absolutely loved this conversation, and I think there's been so many gems like throughout the entire conversation. So just in closing, just to wrap everything up, what advice would you give to somebody who is considering moving to Canada, and especially people who are going to be moving with their families and might have kids?
I think once you make that decision, everything that you do should basically be working slowly towards that goal. You should cast as the widest net that you can to allow your family the most opportunities. You know what I mean? Don't just focus on one thing. Like if we were just focusing on the express entry, we would have never
Mm,
gotten the lanes in, and there's various other different things. I
yeah.
think one thing is important is that you must always like look at different opportunities and see where you could potentially just place yourself. And also, this goes without saying that there's a lot of scams in the world. Be cautious, especially when you have kids. Be very cautious of things and always try to do as much of a background and investigation as you can. But make sure you're putting yourself out there. If there's a draw right now, let's say the Canadian government is going crazy and puts the score at 100, guess who's not going to get the invitation? Someone who doesn't have a profile.
Yep.
If you don't have it, you're not in the game. You're not in the game. You have to put
And
yourself out there. You have to put yourself
that
in the running.
happened. It happened a couple of, but with the Canadian experience class within the express entry. Canadian experience class, I think it was maybe just before was it before the pandemic? But anyway, like a couple of years ago, the government went and the scores there were averaging 400 and something, similar to how express entry for the federal skilled worker program was. It was around the same. And for whatever reason, they decided to drop it to, I think it was 79 points. So everyone who
Imagine,
had
gosh.
79 points. Imagine now I'm pretty sure there's a lot of people who frantically started putting in their profiles then, but you're a bit
Too late.
late. You can still do it, yes, but if you don't have a profile, you're not even putting yourself in that
You're
space of
not in
having
there.
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think
Like
one of
people
the
will say,
other
I had a
things,
job. Sorry, yeah.
no, I was going to say one of the other things that came to mind when you just mentioned how people should open themselves up and not look at one thing. After moving to Canada, that's when I learned that there are literally over 100 programs that could potentially get you in Canada. There's so many programs that exist, and if you are going to listen to maybe Busi's story or you listen to a viewer's story and you're like, oh, I'm going to focus on these two, you've already closed yourself up a lot. Like, yes, you can look at these ones if they make sense for your skills, maybe your experience, but also open yourself up, spend time on that website and figure out what programs exist that could help you. I love
Mm.
that you brought that up.
Exactly. Because
Absolutely love
people will
it.
be like, I'm looking for a job. I don't know where to look, but this person has no LinkedIn, no Indeed. They have no resume. I've seen people who have no resume, but they're looking for a job. How are you looking for a job again? With no CV?
Yeah.
What just like it makes no sense. So you have to put yourself out there. So when an opportunity comes your way, you're ready. You
Mm.
are on ball, you know where to go, you know what to do, and things are going to work much faster because you had prepared yourself for that opportunity, however it comes. So you never know. Like literally, we went on holiday, we came back, and there was an offer, and everything spiraled and happened, and
So
in 3 months'
quickly.
time, it was done. And
Yeah.
because it's also because we had familiarized ourselves with every single paperwork that we needed to do. We knew, okay, they want the certificates, they want this from us. We already have, okay, take this from the university, certified, do this. They want this. Our kids had passports. You can't tell me that you want to travel and thing, and your child doesn't even have a passport. Like you
Yep.
need to have those. Even if you haven't thought about how am I gonna pay for this trip or whatever, your child needs to have that passport. So you're not once you figure it out and you're scrambling. Oh, I need to go to Home Affairs. But now you have a trip
Mm.
coming up and your child doesn't have a passport. You need to prepare yourself, get yourself ready for that opportunity when it comes, and you're ready, and everything will work out.
And that's where the luck comes. Where people are like, oh, you were so lucky.
No,
There's
no
an
luck.
opportunity that came along and I was prepared to grab it with both hands.
For sure. For sure.
Yeah.
Like when my husband, even during the interviews, we knew what to say because we had, and one of the guys that he was in an interview with went to Canada on a work permit and did express entry. He's a British guy. And so they also spoke about that as a common thing that they spoke about. And if you have no idea and you're like, I don't know, it's okay. This person clearly has no clue what's happening, has no plans to have a longer career in this company. So put him aside. So having those things and being aware of the potential things that could come up that are not related just to the job and just like on how your plans are, because they hired him on the basis that he actually wanted to stay in Canada, not just like a once-off thing. Oh, I'm just coming here for no. I don't know. They say, "Oh, have you had an express entry profile?" And then, yeah, of course, we have this plans. But if that was one of the set criteria, and you said, "What? What do you mean express?" And they're like, "Okay, cool. This guy is not the one." You
Yeah.
never know what those things can potentially lead to.
True. Thank you so much, Iviwe, for your time and dropping so many gems and just knowledge that people can take and run with if they actually are serious about wanting to move. But thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode. Again, if you would like to have a chance to win a LinkedIn revamp that will be done by me in collaboration with Eviwe, make sure you are following both of us on Instagram so you don't miss the post that will tell you how you can actually enter.
Thank you for watching.